Good morning, everyone. Our topic this morning is about looking back. And today we will learn that if we have significant experience about who God had been in our lives, we will have that strength in charging our successors, our supporters, or our followers to do the will of God, and we will also have strength in strengthening them to follow God, and even ensuring and mandating them that they should obey, and also making it clear that there is also certainty in God's giving consequences for those who will not obey Him. Our text is Joshua chapter 23, verse 1 to 16. And I want you to read with me responsibly this text. This is a long chapter, 1 to 16. I'll start with the odd numbers and then you respond with the even numbers. Joshua chapter 23, verse 1 to 16. Let's use the text flash on our screen. It says, "And it came to pass a long time after that the Lord had given rest unto Israel from all their enemies round about, that Joshua waxed old and stricken in age. And you have seen all that the Lord your God has done unto all these nations because of you. For the Lord your God is he that has fought for you." "And the Lord your God, he shall expel them from before you, and drive them from out of your sight, and you shall possess their land, as the Lord your God has promised unto you." "That you come not among these nations, this that remain among you, neither make mention of the name of their gods, nor cause to swear by them, neither serve them, nor bow yourselves unto them. For the Lord has driven out from before you great nations and strong, but as for you, no man has been able to stand before you unto this day. Take good heed therefore unto yourselves, that you love the Lord your God. Know for a certainty that the Lord your God will no more drive out any of these nations from before you, but they shall be snares and traps unto you, and scourges in your sides, and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from off this land, from this good land which the Lord your God has given you." "Therefore it shall come to pass, that as all good things are come upon you, which the Lord your God promised you, so shall the Lord bring upon you all evil things, until he has destroyed you from off this good land, which the Lord your God has given you. When you have transgressed the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and have gone and served other gods, and bowed yourselves to them, then shall the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and you shall perish quickly from off the good land which he has given unto you. Okay? If you will analyze this chapter, the main idea centers on Joshua delegated to the Israelites the conquest of the nations that remain. And in the process of charging the Israelites to conquer the remaining nations, he strengthened them by looking at the past, how God had been powerful over what he has done before them, and he mandated full obedience so that they will experience success on their own. Okay? So that's the theme of this chapter. And as I have said, looking back of what had been God showing to us, what had we experienced with God, will give us fuel, will give us strength to move forward to the next assignment that he has given us. Okay? So that's the theme of our message this morning. Now let's start immediately with the first one. Let's go to the charge. That's the first point now. The charge of Joshua to all Israelites. And the charge was, what was the mandate or charge? To conquer the remaining land. And that is in verse 1, 2, and 4. Actually, it's stated in verse 4, but let's set the setting, the context, okay? This is a long time after they had established supremacy over the promised land, John MacArthur in his comment says that around this, although the next chapter will tell us that Joshua is 110 years old when he died, so he might have been 110 years old at this time, and he was about to die because he also mentioned that in verse 24 that he is about to die. No, in verse 14, verse 14 of chapter 23. And according to him, Joshua was around 85. He was around 90 years old when he invaded the Canaan land. And it took him 7 years to gain supremacy over the Canaan land. So from 97 to 110, so that's what this verse 1 refer. It came to pass a long time, so from 97 to 110, around 13 years. And then Joshua, he was an elderly man. He called the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers. And then he said, I am old and I am stricken in age. I cannot go to battle and lead you. Okay? And then he said in verse 4, Behold, I have divided unto you by lot these nations that remain. So there are still nations that remain that haven't been conquered by Joshua under his leadership. And he already divided those remaining nations among the 12 for them to conquer respectively. Oh, actually 9.5, because the 2.5 had already received their share in the west part of Jordan, in the east part of Jordan. Okay? And then he said, I have divided a lot, and all you have to do is conquer them on your own. Okay? This will be an inheritance for you. And this charge, if you look at this charge and compare it with Joshua chapter 11, verse 23, it says here, So Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord said unto Moses. And Joshua gave it for an inheritance unto Israel according to their divisions by their tribes, and the land rested from war. It appeared, if you look at this verse, that Joshua has conquered everything in the promised land. According to this verse, 11:23, he took the whole land. But in chapter 13, 2 chapters after this, verse 1, it says here, Now Joshua was old and stricken in years, and the Lord said unto him, You are old, next slide, and stricken in years, and there remaineth yet very much land to be possessed. Okay. And verse 2 says, And this is the land that yet remaineth. And that land is enumerated in verse 2b up to 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, how do you reconcile this against chapter 11, verse 23, which says that Joshua took the whole land? Well, we can conclude by saying that this means that though they haven't established or they haven't conquered all, but more or less they have established supremacy by winning the major battle. Okay? Now, later on you will discover that God has a purpose why He allowed that this whole land will not be conquered by Joshua himself with his leadership. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 22, there is a mandate by God that there has to be a gradual possession of the Canaan land. Okay? It has to be gradual. Otherwise, if they will conquer everything in one setting and then they will fail to occupy, then animals will occupy, the beast will occupy the land. It says here, and the Lord your God will put out those nations before you little by little, that you may not consume them at once, or else the beast of the field increase upon you. Now, the other purpose of God is test of obedience. Okay? Test of obedience. God wanted the respective tribe, after they have seen who God had been under the leadership of Joshua, how they will also respectively conquer their share on their own. So that's a test of obedience. That's why Joshua in chapter 6, verse 21, in chapter 13, verse 6, there is a mandate by God to Joshua that don't conquer the remaining land. Only divide it. Divide it among the 12 tribes. And let them respectively, each one of them, conquer the remaining nations. Okay. If you go back to Joshua's mandate by God, we can see that he has 3 mandates, which he is also charging the same mandate to the Israelites when they conquer the remaining inheritance. The first mandate of God to Joshua is he has to conquer the land. He has to conquer the land. That's Joshua chapter 1, verse 2. It says here, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, and you and all this people. So he has to lead this Israelite in entering the promised land and conquering them, and to the land which I do give them, even to the children of Israel. Now the second mandate of God is, whoever that are locals there, when you arrive in the Canaan land, whether women, whether young, kill all of them. That's a hard mandate. Because we know in Deuteronomy that they have been persistently disobeying God, they hate God, and God doesn't want them to influence the Israelite, God said, you have filled my land with innocent blood, because they caused their children, the firstborn, to be offered as a burnt offering for their worship of their gods. So that's in Deuteronomy chapter 18. So we can see in the first battle of Joshua with Jericho, in chapter 6, verse 21, it says here, and they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and ass, with the edge of the sword. So the first assignment is to conquer the land. Whoever is there, kill all of them. And third, divide the conquered land. So that's the third assignment of Joshua. Joshua 1:6, God said, be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shall you divide for an inheritance the land which I swore unto their fathers to give them. Okay? So that's essentially the content of the whole book of Joshua. Conquer, kill, divide. So you will see in chapter 1 to chapter 5, it's all about preparation for the conquering of the land. Chapter 6 to chapter 11 is about 5 recorded battles of Joshua against the enemies. Okay? And in chapter 12, it's a summary about what he had accomplished in terms of conquering. Now, in that summary, it is mentioned also that Moses had killed already 2 kings, and Joshua killed 31 kings. Because as you know, before they crossed over Jordan, the east part, there were already 2 kingdoms, the kingdom of Sihon and the kingdom of Og, that Moses had killed. And out of that kingdom, he distributed the land among the 2.5 tribes. The tribes of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, and the tribe, half of Manasseh. No? So the remaining 9.5 tribes will be the one recipient of the western side of Jordan. Okay? But Joshua mandated the armed men of the 2.5, not because you have already received your share, that you stay there, but you have to go to your with the Israelites and go with them and conquer their remaining share. Okay, so in Joshua chapter 13, verse 21, okay, Joshua chapter 13, verse 21, it speaks about the distribution of the land. And you will see there that the land is distributed according to the mandate of Joshua, Eleazar the priest, and the elders of each tribe. There was a consensus. Where will this land be inherited to? Where will this land be given to? And if you look at, kaya nga, pag basahin mo yung Joshua, parang minsan boring, no, from chapter 6 to 21. Because it speaks a lot of places. It speaks a lot of names. God wants us to know that this event really took place. And He devoted 21 minus 5, 16 chapters to tell us this is what happening when Joshua conquered, and this is what happening when they divided the land. Because the books of the Bible is books of events, places. It happened in real places, with real people, in real time. So pag binasa natin, wag tayong mag-surrender na, oops, ang dami nitong pangalan. Just take time, no? And appreciate the facts. The facts, because you cannot go to correct interpretation unless you substantially observe the facts. That's our danger, no? That's our problem most of the time. We hurry in capturing the interpretation, not thoroughly observing the facts, no? Okay? So, chapter 6 to 11 is about the conquest, and it speaks of 5 battles by Joshua. The battle with Jericho, the battle of Ai, and then Ai again, and then the 5 kings, and then the remaining kings in the northern side. And then chapter 13 to 21 speaks about the division, where he divided the land to Reuben, Levi, Judah, Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Benjamin, and Joseph, the 12 tribes. Okay? Now, the land was distributed, and it was headed by Joshua, Eleazar, and the elders. So, that was the first point. That's the first point, no? The charge of Joshua for the Israelite to conquer the remaining land. And Joshua has that strength, no? Has that authority to mandate kasi pinakita niya sa mga Israelite. He has modeled before them how he had conquered the land. Kaya meron siyang lakas, no, na sa kanyang edad na 110. Look, I have been with you the last 7 years, and I have shown to you how God, under my leadership, no, ordained leadership, has conquered the land. Now, let's look at the second point. Okay. So the first point is the charge of Joshua. Go back again. The charge of Joshua to all Israelites. What's the charge? Conquer the nations that remain. Okay? So there were nations that remain because God wanted to test each tribe if they will go on their own and battle, if they will really do what Joshua has modeled before them, attack and kill all. But unfortunately, many of the tribes didn't follow. Kaya you will see there, no, in some verses in Joshua and Judges that the tribe allowed the locals to stay with them, and they even intermarry with them. And that's the story of Judges. No? It's a story of the Israelites up and down, and down for 400 years because they didn't cast away the locals when they arrived to the remaining land. Now, second point, the strength of the charge. Okay, the strength of the charge. Now, what's the strength of the charge? The strength of the charge is that Joshua, when he made the mandate, he looked back. He looked back. And then he said to them, look who God had been in our holy war against these idolatrous and wicked nations. So pinakita niya ang nakaraan, no? Pinapaalala niya sa mga Israelite ang nakaraan na performance ng God, ng Diyos, no? Upang maging fuel, maging lakas nila na humakbang. I think this principle is very important, no? What gives you strength to really follow the Lord, to really obey, is your past experience of who He had been to you. Baon mo yun eh. Baon mo yun. Si Joshua, in fact, gumagawa siya ng mga reminder, no? Symbols to remind them that this is who God had been. When they crossed the Jordan River, and then God said, when the soles of the feet of the priests step on the river, I will stop the flow of the river. So that you could cross over the Jordan on dry ground. After they did that, Joshua gathered 12 stones, big stones for each tribe. And they put that in the promised land so that when the children, the descendants, see that stone, they will be reminded, this is what God had done when we crossed the Jordan River. And they will be reminded, and it will create a fear upon them to continue worshiping the Lord until forever. So it's good to have reminder of the past, Me, one of my way to remind of how God had been good in my life is to put that into prayer. At least once every 2 weeks or once every month. There is a particular time when I pray that I focus more on highlighting who God had been in my life since I was in high school until college, and then I grew up as an adult and then married person. So just the highlight, no? If you will do that, you'll be amazed, no? Minsan, 1 hour, 2 hours will not be enough, no? Will not be enough. And that's a very powerful to strengthen in your mind and in your heart what God had been doing in your life. And then that propels you to obey the next assignment. Now, there are 3 things here that Joshua reminded the Israelites. Number 1 is, it's the Lord that fought for them. He said in chapter 23, verse 3, and you have seen all that the Lord your God has done. The Lord your God has done, to all these nations because of you. For the Lord your God is He that has fought for you. And it's the Lord because the Lord promised to be with them. You look at chapter 1, verse 5. This is God's promise to Joshua. There shall not any man be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you, and I will not fail you nor forsake you. In Joshua 1:9b, no man shall be able to stand against you. The Lord is with you wherever you will go. So the Lord was the one who fought for them because the Lord was with them. And He promised that. He promised that. Joshua 5:13 and 14. In fact, God gave Joshua a visible person to assure him that He will be with him. And that is in Joshua chapter 5. So there was a man that Joshua encountered, and that was God. God who put Himself into human form. And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. A man with his sword in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said, Are you for us? Are you for us? Or for our enemies, adversaries? And in 14 it says, And the man said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth, and he worshipped, and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? And the man said, verse 15, And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon you stand this is holy. And Joshua did so. Okay? So ang Diyos, meron siyang meron siyang physical na pamamaraan. Meron siyang banal na pamamaraan na physically, mas-sense talaga natin yung kanyang presence. Oo. Mas-sense. Though He is spiritual, and the number one character of spirituality is invisibility, but God in His power has a way of letting us know that He is with us. He is with us. He is. We can never be mistaken, sa presensya ng Diyos sa buhay natin. Now, it was the Lord who fought for them. As I've mentioned, chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 is a summary of the 5 recorded battles of Joshua against Jericho, against Ai, against the 5 coalition of kings, and against the coalition of the northern kingdoms. Okay? Now, let me highlight to you lang, quickly, how God had shown that it was Him who fought with the enemies. In the first battle against Jericho, it is said that Jericho is located in a hill land, and it is surrounded with two rings of gates. Dalawang ring. The first ring is 6 feet thick, and the second ring is 12 feet thick. That explains na ang bahay ni Rahab, bakit nasa taas? Kasi over the top, there is a lumber that could carry the house, So, nasa taas. Tapos, bakod siya ng dalawang walls. External, 6 feet wide, and then internal is 12 feet wide. So, kaya ang normal na strategy ng mga kaaway is, palibutan nila yung paligid, and then, hindi nila papalabasin yung mga nasa loob, for how many months until they will surrender for scarcity or hunger. So ganun ang strategy. But God said, no. My strategy is roam around, circle around the land for 7 days. Each day, for 6 days, you roam around, you circle 1 time. And this is how you order your march. First group, the army. Second, the 7 priests bearing the trumpets. And the third batch, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. And the fourth group is the rear army. Okay? So while you march, you blow the trumpet. First, 1 every day for 6 days. And on the 7th day, 7 times. And after the 7th time, the 7 priests blew the trumpet loudly. And that's the clue for all of them to shout loud. And after that shouting, the wall will collapse. The wall will collapse. The 6 feet wide and the 12 feet wide will collapse. And it will collapse in a manner na yung bahay ni Rahab hindi matumba. Kasi di ba, we know the latter part of the battle that she was rescued and her family. So it was God who orchestrated that fight, okay? So there was 2nd battle, there was 3rd battle, there was 4th battle. The 4th battle was a powerful one because the Lord confused the enemies. We don't know how He confused the enemies, so they run against the Israelite. They run from the Israelite, and when they run, God sent hailstone. Big hailstone, from heaven. So that's divine, And how God did it na the stone will hit not the Israelite but the adversaries, the enemies. And after that, He caused Joshua to mandate, sun, stood still, moon, do not move until they have enough time to kill their enemies. No? It says here, and the Lord discomfited them before Israel and slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon and chased them along the way that goeth up to Bethoron and smote them to Azekah and unto Makkedah. And 11, and it came to pass as they fled from before Israel, and were in the going down to Bethron, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died. There were more which died with hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. Mas marami ang namatay sa pinadala ni God na hailstone kaysa sandata ng mga Israelite. And 12, then spoke Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and has said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. So there was two places, no? Gibeon, sabi ni Joshua, sun, don't move. In Ajalon, moon, don't move until we finish our fight. And verse 13, and the sun stood still and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. So nag-move lang ang sun and moon until after they finished their battle. No? Okay? Now the last recorded battle it was the coalition against, a battle against coalition of the northern kings. No? Ito last recorded battle, ang dami nilang kalaban. No? Sabi nga sa forces na they were as plenty as the sun, the sun of the seashore. Okay? But we only can read that it says, and the Lord delivered them. Ganun lang ang sinabi ng verse. It didn't mention specific account how God caused them to be beaten or to be defeated by the Israelites. It says in verse 8 of chapter 11, and the Lord delivered them. The Lord delivered them. How? We don't know. God opted not to disclose how He delivered them to the Israelites. Okay? So the second one is Joshua looked back how the Lord caused defeat of great and strong nations. Okay? So verse 9 of our text, it says here, for the Lord had driven out from before you great nations and strong, but as for you, no man had been able to stand before you unto this day. And to this day. You know what? Their enemies is described in chapter 9 of verse 1 and 2 of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy. Okay. It says here, Hear, O Israel, you are to pass over Jordan this day to go in to possess nations, nations that are greater and mightier than you. Cities that are great, and they are fenced up to heaven. They are great and tall. They are the children of Anakims. The children of Anak, no? Sa Tagalog pa, mga anak ni Anak. No? Whom thou knowest, and of whom thou hast heard say, who can stand before the children of Anak? So that was the byword before. Who can stand before the children of Anak? Because they were really tall. No? Okay? That's why, if you remember Numbers 13 and 14, when the 12 spies were sent, and when they came back, obviously, in their mind, militarily and humanly speaking, we couldn't fight successfully against these children of Anak. So, they convinced the Israelites, let's go back to Egypt because we will die. We will die if we will fight with this mightier and great nations. But the Lord told them, I am a consuming fire. In verse 3, I am a consuming fire. I am a consuming fire. He said, understand therefore this day that the Lord thy God is He which goeth over you before thee. As what? As a consuming fire. And the Lord shall destroy them, and He shall bring them down before your face. So shalt thou drive them out and destroy them quickly, as the Lord has said unto thee. So ganun ang paglarawan ni God sa kanyang kapangyarihan, kanyang kapasidad. I am a consuming fire. That's why even the inhabitants of the land, even if they haven't been attacked by Israelite, they were already full of fear. Dahil narinig nila ang balita, no, sa ginawa ng Diyos. Remember the two spies, when they spied Jericho, they met Rahab. Rahab believed God because Rahab heard what God had done 40 years ago. Imagine, the event took place 40 years ago. But in her mind, it was so clear. And then she said, you know what? Our family and our people are fearful of your coming. Because we know what your Lord has done when you left Egypt. This is what she said in verse 9. And Rahab said unto the men, the two spies, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard, they heard two things, no? How the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea. This was 40 years ago. And when you came out of Egypt, and when you did, and what you did unto the two kings of the Amorites, this was 2 years ago. The king of Sihon and the king of Og. You utterly destroyed them. Those three events, the parting of the Red Sea, the killing of the kingdom of Sihon and Og, which are two big kingdoms in the east part of Jordan, caused fear among the inhabitants of Jericho. That's why in verse 11 it says, as soon as we have heard these things, hindi natin alam kung paano narinig nila yun, no? Kasi wala pang dun eh. Our hearts did melt. But it happened that they heard. Our hearts did melt. Neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. No? So this is a woman, no? Kalahi ng mga kaaway na nagside sa mga Israelite because she believed God. No? She believed. In Joshua chapter 2 verse 24, the spies reported to Joshua, they said, Joshua, truly the Lord had delivered into our hands all the land, for even all the inhabitants of the country do faint because of us. No? So, the consuming fire, no, of God, yung kanyang kapasidad, yung kanyang kapangyarihan, nakarating sa mga locals. So Joshua chapter 5 verse 1, when Joshua stopped the flow of the Jordan River, that event also reached the ears of the locals. No? In verse 1 of chapter 5 it says here, and it came to pass, when all the kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites, which were by the sea, they heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of Jordan before the children of Israel. That's why they were able to cross on dry ground. That their heart melted, neither was their spirit in them anymore because of the children of Israel. But you know what? They still didn't surrender. Ang makita lang natin na nag-surrender dito sa battle na to is yung lahi ni Gibeon, nakasama niya yung tatlong cities pa, and then the family of Rahab and her family. The rest, they established a coalition to fight against Israelite, no, hoping they could fight against the consuming fire, no, God. So let's look at the third things that Joshua looked back. The unfailing faithfulness of God. No? So Joshua looked back and said, it's the Lord who fought for us. It's the Lord who caused defeat of our great and strong nations. And he also account, no, the unfailing faithfulness of God. In Joshua chapter 23 verse 14, it says here, this is very wonderful, no? Join with me to look at this verse. It says here, and behold, this day I am going the way of all the earth. This is Joshua. This is saying, I am dying. I'm about to die. The next chapter, he died at the age of 110. And you know in all your hearts, and in all your souls, that not one thing had failed of all the good things which the Lord your God spoke concerning you. All are come to pass unto you, and not one thing has failed. No? It's a compound sentence, no? Positive and negative. All came to pass. Not one thing has failed. Not one thing has failed. Yung abiding na katapatan ng Diyos, no? You know, when we look at faithfulness of God, it's not only His faithfulness to fulfill His promise, no? But also His faithfulness to fulfill His words if we disobey. Sometimes we forget that aspect, no? God is true to His words. When you obey, He will be true to His words. When you disobey, He will be true to His words. In fact, He said, no, in the same way that I am passionate to pour out my love to you, I will be the same passionate to pour out my anger to you when you disobey me. The same passion God will pour out to those who will obey and to those who will disobey. So that was the strength of the charge of Joshua. No? He looked back. He looked back. He looked back. It was the Lord who fought for them. It was the Lord who caused defeat. And it happened because of the unfailing faithfulness of God. He was true to His promise to their ancestors, no? To their ancestors. Now let's look at the third one, the third point, no? The reward and curse of the charge. Okay. So Joshua, after he charged them, conquer the nations that remain. Look at the past, how God had been with us. Now it's your turn. Each tribe, you go to your share and conquer. Destroy all. And this is what you will do. Obey. In case you will not, this is what will happen to you. So he emphasized the reward of obedience and the curse if they will disobey. If they will disobey. So here we can see, Joshua assured them of God's presence and victory. And he also warned them of the consequences of their disobedience. This one is the product of their obedience. If they will disobey, God's presence will surely be there, and victory will happen. But if they won't obey, there is consequence of disobedience. And Joshua even used the noun of certainty. Know for certain that this will happen if you will not obey Him. In Joshua chapter 23, verse 5, it says here, and the Lord your God, this is Joshua, no? Stating the reward. He shall expel them from before you. In the same way that He had expelled, no? The enemies. And drive them out from your sight, and you shall possess their land as the Lord your God had promised unto you. That was the promise of God. I will expel them. I will expel them. Verse 9, for the Lord has driven out from before you great nations and strong, but as for you, no man had been able to stand before you unto this day. Joshua is emphasizing, you will be a strong, no? You will be a strong person in the sense that no one will be able to defeat you because God will be with you. The consuming fire will be with you. Verse 10, it said, one man of you shall chase 1,000 for the Lord your God. He it is that will fight for you, that fighteth for you as He has promised you. Okay. So yun yung mandate ni Joshua, no? And that's the corresponding reward. And this is his mandate, no? Verse 6. This is what you will do. Be courageous. Mahirap yung role ni Joshua, yung hikayatin niya mga Israelite na sumama sa kanya na makipaglaban. And pagdating dun sa field, patayin niya lahat. Ang hirap nun. Right? Children, including old women. Nabasa ko sa chapter 11 ng Joshua, no, na sinabi doon na, the Lord hardened the hearts of most kings, no, so that they will fight against Israelite, no. And then I had a hard time na, hindi ba to how I will explain this na hindi ito sin, no? Parang, or unfair, the Lord hardened. But the Lord just told me na, pinapapatay nga niya eh. Mas mabigat pa yun kaysa pinapaharden niya yung puso, no? Pinapapatay niya eh. Because these people are continuously living a sinful life, hating God, and they offer their sons as burnt offering to their gods. They filled the promised land of God with the innocent blood of their children. So Joshua said in verse 6, "Be very courageous to keep and to do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, that you turn not aside therefrom to the right or to the left. This is what he received from the Lord, and this is what he passed on to them. Do not come out among these nations that remain you, because neither make mention of the name of their gods, nor cause them to swear by them, neither serve them, nor bow yourselves unto them. But cleave unto the Lord your God, as you have done unto this day. For the Lord has driven," next slide, "out from before you great nations and strong, but as for you, no man has been able to stand before you unto this day." So yun yung kanyang exhortation for obedience and yung kanyang statement of the reward that God will be with them. God will be with them, no? Will give them success. But ito naman yung warning of the consequence of disobedience. Joshua chapter 23 verse 12. "If you do in any wise go back and cleave unto the remnant of these nations, even these nations that remain among you, and you shall make marriages with them, and go in unto them, and they to you, know for a certainty," this is what he emphasized, "that the Lord your God will no more drive out any of these nations." Di na paalisin ni God. "And these nations will be a perpetual cause of your misery, until the Lord will remove you off from this good land that He promised you to dwell and inherit." Sabi niya dito, how he emphasized that? "They will be snares to you, they will be traps to you, they will be scourges in your sides, they will be thorns in your eyes, until you perished from off this good land which the Lord your God had given you." And then he continues in verse 15, "It shall come to pass that as all good things are come upon you which the Lord your God promised you, so shall the Lord God bring upon you all evil things, until he has destroyed you from off this good land which the Lord your God hath given you." You know what? Why the Lord will do that? Verse 16 explains to us, chapter 23, the next slide. "Because they will kindle the anger of the Lord." Ang Diyos is banal. Bawat gawa natin ng kasalanan, napukaw ang kanyang innate response na wrath or anger. Ang anger ni God, ang wrath niya, hindi siya katulad ng ating anger, no? That's the innate default response of God every time we commit sin, no? And because He is just, He is justice, no? He is right. That sin has to be penalized, no? That has to be removed. And then He said, "You kindle my anger, you kindle the anger of the Lord, because you bowed yourselves to them, their gods." You know, one of the things that really caused the anger of the Lord to be kindled is when we worship other gods. When we worship ourselves, when we worship our work, when we spend more time things other than God. We have a short-sighted view of what is idolatry, no? But idolatry includes everything other than God. Other than God. Ito obvious lang kasi they have gods talaga and they were living under the directions of evil spirits. So, looking back, no? Looking back. Our theme is looking back. When we have substantially experienced who God had been in our lives, kung ang ating lakad ay balot talaga ng karanasan na nandiyan ang Diyos, yan talaga ang magbigay sa atin ng lakas na humakbang, na puno ng pagsunod sa Diyos. At yan din ang magbigay sa atin ng lakas na hikayatin ang lahat na sumunod din. Kaya tayo kulang, no? Mahina ang ating persuasiveness pagdating sa pagsunod sa Diyos dahil maaring tayo mismo wala tayong baon na mga nangyayari sa nakaraan na magtulak sa atin na humakbang at dalhin ang iba. You know, Joshua, he is magnified by the Lord. No? Several times the Lord magnified him. The Lord told him, don't worry, Joshua. When you assume leadership, don't worry about people comparing you with Moses. As I was with Moses, I will be with you. So yung pagpatigil ni Joshua sa Jordan River, that was a momentous event for God to prove that this person is the one I'm ordaining. And after that, the people, the Israelites, obeyed Joshua in the same manner that they obeyed Moses. What I'm trying to drive at is that it's one thing to obey the Lord, no? But it's another thing to really bring people along with you to obey Him. That way you magnify the Lord and He will magnify you. When He fought with Jericho and He defeated Jericho, the verse says, the popularity of Joshua grew out of all the country. He magnified the Lord, and the Lord subsequently magnified him. That's why he had this kind of strength, no? Yung paghikayat niya sa mga Israelite na pagpunta niyo sa mga respected niyo na inheritance, ganito ang inyong gagawin. At sa inyong paglakad at sa inyong pakipaglaban, alalahanin niyo kung sino si God na sumama sa atin. Siya ang nakipaglaban. Tapat siya. Tapat siya kasama sa pagtupad ng kanyang pangako. Tapat din siya na tayo'y parusahan kapag hindi tayo sumunod sa kanya. Kaya, ano man ang hamon natin sa buhay, balikan natin kung paano naging makapangyarihan, paano naging tapat ang Diyos, sa buhay natin. Tayo po'y manalangin. Aming Diyos, maraming salamat sa buhay ni Joshua at sa kanyang aklat na inyo pong pinahintulutan na maisulat so that it will be our instruction, our teaching, our exhortation, God. Lord, you have powerfully teach us this morning that when we look back, Lord, who you have been sa buhay namin, yan po ay magbibigay sa amin ng lakas upang humakbang na puno ng pagsunod sa kasalukuyan naming hinaharap at sa haharapin pa namin in the future. Salamat o Diyos sa inyong mensahe. Salamat na nandun ang inyong pangako na you will always be with us. You will accompany us. You will be the one who will fight for us. God, I pray that you speak to each one of us here this morning. I know, Lord, that each one of us has challenges, has problems, has heaviness, Lord. Whatever they are, Lord, I pray, God, na dalhin niyo po sila na lumapit sa inyong salita, lumapit at manalangin sa inyo. At katagpuin niyo po sila, sa kanilang mga kahinaan, sa aming mga kahinaan. at kayo ang aming maging kalakasan upang kami po ay sumunod, umakbang, baon ang katotohanan na kayo ay sasama sa amin at kayo ang aming maging katagumpayan. Salamat o Diyos. We love you, God. This is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.